Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Pyromancer here, and welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all having a wonderful day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. And today we're going to be going over the Arbiter and talking a little bit about her, but mostly about the cinematic where she is disabled. And this is something I know a lot of you wanted to hear about, so I hope you guys are excited for this one. We're going to be talking about what I think may have disabled her now that we've seen the cinematic, right? Like I put out a video a while ago with some ideas, but that was before we actually had this revealed to us in the way that we got it. A couple other things, guys. I've put out several videos over the last couple days, some of which have not been pushed to sub boxes. I don't know if you guys know this, but I still have people asking me, hey, who do you think the Winter Queen's sister is? Well, I actually have a video of that. There'll be a link to that down in the description, and it'll be on the end card of this video, where I actually talk about who I think the Winter Queen's sister is. Spoiler alert, I don't think that it's Elune, but I think that Elune is involved in a very important way. So, with that being said, you guys, we're gonna watch this Arbiter cinematic, and we're just gonna get that old school Pyromancer, just go along with it as you watch it, speculation, and we're gonna talk about this. So, this video here that we're about to watch is over on Laced TV's channel. Thank you to him for capturing this cinematic and throwing it up on YouTube. Let's get into this and see what we got going on here.
For uncounted eons, the Shadowlands was in perfect order.
So, okay, a couple things I just want to start with right off the rip. So here we have Oribos, which is this kind of midpoint for the Shadowlands where everything comes through into this sorting hat that is kind of, you know, it's all done by this Arbiter. And the Arbiter uses her infallible judgment to essentially direct souls to where they need to go. Couple important things we need to recognize about Oribos, though, that it's custom tailored for a couple of the leaders of some of the Shadowlands realms. What I mean is, there's supposed to be like infinite Shadowlands realms, right? Like once we get more into the cinematic, you're going to see countless portals that the Arbiter is sending souls into. I don't know if this was an accident. I kind of feel like it wasn't, because Blizzard basically never makes accidents in these types of cinematics. But when we first come in here, you can see 6 different streams of souls. So you have the massive soul funnel coming from the top, the soul pillar. You have a very small amount of souls, if that's even what that is. I mean, I assume it is, or anima, or whatever that is. I assume it's souls, moving through down to the Maw, because the Maw is below Oribos. Then you have 4 of these streams heading out to Ardenweald, Revendreth, Maldraxxus, and Bastion. Now, the thing about this is there are 4 dedicated streams of anima that are pretty much constantly flowing here from what I'm seeing. When you go to the Arbiter's platform, which I think we might see enough of during the cinematic for me to show you, but if not, you'll see it in the game. When you progress through the story enough, there's a point where all of the leaders that are still around, so everyone except the Jailer and the Primus, come together on these 4 platforms around the Arbiter. Now that suggests to me that there are infinite afterlives, but there are 4 of them that might be a little bit, or 4 or 5 of them, that might be a little bit more important than the other ones. And these guys seem to have a more direct connection with the Arbiter. So the Winter Queen, the Primus, the Sardonathrius, the Jailer, and the Archon seem to have some kind of special connection. They have their own, like, dedicated lines, essentially, is what's going on here. Otherwise, there should be streams of souls flying out everywhere into these infinite portals, but that's not the way it's depicted. So that could just be happenstance from how they designed the cinematic, but I think that's interesting. Also, what Talinara here says is, for uncounted aeons, the Shadowlands was in perfect order. For uncounted aeons. So I just want to talk about time in the Shadowlands real quick, because it's believed that time doesn't like function the same way that it does in reality, even though the Shadowlands is referred to by many characters in the Shadowlands as reality, which is weird. They talk about all reality. And they also use quite a lot of terms that relate to time, like aeons. So it's just interesting that we have this idea that, death is separate from time, and time is a construct of the arcane and of order, and that it's kind of irrelevant to death, but there's quite a lot of reference to time in the realm of death. Let's move on.
Eons, the Shadowlands was in perfect order. Infinite after.
And I also just want to say, like, I see death as a pretty orderly thing, but I see death as orderly because it's fair to all beings, right? Death should treat everything that dies the same, because ultimately, why would a soul have to suffer for transgressions committed in life if ultimately, like, it's irrelevant, right? Like, we move away from that. It's because anima, the power source generated by the acts of one in their life, is a power source to fuel this machine that is happening in the Shadowlands. The idea, however, that there's this perfect order, to me seems a little weird, okay? Something about, like, order being heavily asserted upon the realm of death in a way where it's like organizational order rather than just uniformity, if that makes sense. What I mean by that is, like, once again, uniformity would be all souls are created and finished equally, right? Regardless of whether or not they were prideful or whether or not they were a warrior or whatever that might look like. But again, the Shadowlands has purpose, right? That's the whole thing about this, the Arbiter and the purpose and following the path. So just something interesting to me about this that I found a little unnatural, I suppose. But anyway.
Infinite afterlives, with Oribos, the eternal city, as the shining heart.
So the shining heart, the glistening core of it all. That's an interesting one. I want you guys to think about something. You can get some interesting dialogue when you go around Oribos, and we're going to get to what this video is about, trust me. When you go throughout Oribos, you can hear some of the brokers say some interesting things. One of the things you can learn is that Oribos is made out of a strange ore that the brokers have never seen. They don't know where it comes from. They know nothing about it. When you go through Oribos and you look closely at the walls, and you look closely at the concept art of Oribos, there are two distinct colors which you'll see show up in speckles and in hues throughout this gray rock that it's made out of. And those are blue and gold. If I had to take a random shot in the dark at what Oribos is made out of, I would probably guess that it's made out of azurite. Now, I know for a lot of people that's not going to make any sense because we only just got azurite for the first time in BFA. I don't believe that's the first time azurite has ever existed, but whatever. I digress. Just an interesting thing that she refers to it as the shining heart, because the heart of Azeroth was this, like, power-brimmed, like, artifact of our world that resembled creation and destruction. Azeroth and presumably Argus, who probably has something to do with the Eternal City of Oribos because he's the Titan of Death. But, you know, once again, could be unrelated.
Every mortal soul came before the Arbiter, and she, ever wise, experienced all that had shaped a soul in life. With this knowledge, she consigned every soul to the afterlife it justly deserved. Until... in that dread moment, our perfect order was shattered.
Okay, so real quick, there's a couple things I want to point out with this. So the souls come before her, right?
With this knowledge, she could...
But the souls don't literally slam into her. So here's an interesting thing. There's a lot of theories out there about what this is, right? And I know that a lot of you that have been watching my videos for a long time, you know that I'm heavily invested in the idea of Argus the Unmaker being this eternal, infinite being that has been around for uncounted aeons and is essential in the story of the Titans as we know it, and the story of the order of the cosmos as we know it. And so I know that many of you will want me to say that I think that this red soul thing is Argus, okay? And I want to say that too. But here's the thing. We don't know that. And the way that this behaves is a little weird because you have this huge stream, this huge funnel of power coming through, right? And then you have this one standout soul that looks to be fucking huge, by the way. Like, compared to everything else going on here, that thing is big. whatever that is. Now, I've heard people say, oh, it's Denathrius' sword. Okay, well, then why didn't it come out of like the Maw or out of Revendreth or something? No, like it came from the outside. It came from somewhere else. That's the thing. It came from outside the Shadowlands, whatever this thing is. Now, we can narrow down the time frame where this could have happened, because I've seen absurd shit. People say things like, it's Arthas. What? What the fuck are you talking about? Sorry, but no. I hear people say things like, it's Gul'dan. Okay, fair. Except Gul'dan's soul and very being was absolutely obliterated by Fel. And so far, as far as I'm aware, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've seen anybody in the Shadowlands whose soul has been obliterated by or died to Fel. Don't think we've seen that yet. So I'm kind of thinking it wasn't Gul'dan. It wouldn't be Varian, because it doesn't make any sense. Even though Varian has the heart of a warrior, the soul of a warrior, spirit of a warrior, and it burns within him in this red fiery rage, similar to Sylvanas and similar to Sargeras, wouldn't make sense for it to be him. One idea that's gone around is Xavius. Okay, let's play with that a little bit. So we know that time frame wise, that Ysera did make it into the Shadowlands, as did Ursoc. But that's like the closest that we can get to figuring out like when this may have occurred. Ysera was among the last group to make it in. That does not mean that Ysera was the last one, okay? So my prior theory about this being Ysera could be flawed because of that. It might not be Ysera, because evidently she would have most likely been the last one to come through if that were the case, but that's not what we're told. She's not the last one. So Xavius could be a thing. However, we did kill Xavius in the Emerald Dream. I don't know how that would affect his transition to the Shadowlands. I don't know how that would work. The only reason I don't necessarily want it to be Xavius is because, one, Xavius is more tied to the Emerald Dream and Emerald Nightmare, and I don't think Xavius is that big of a player, if that makes sense. Unless this was like some 5 billion IQ play by Sargeras when he first made Xavius the first satyr, which I kind of just don't, I can't sell myself on that idea. But then what happened after the Emerald Nightmare? Like, what are some major events? You have the breaking of the Soul Cage by Sylvanas, which there isn't enough proof of that going on. Sylvanas did make a deal with Helia. Perhaps Sylvanas gave part of her soul or something like that to Helia, which was sent through to Oribos, which broke the Arbiter. Maybe. You have some other events after that. You have the Tomb of Sargeras. You have the Nighthold, where you have some pretty major characters die, but most of them are demonic. None of them really seem to fit the bill for what could cause something like this. And then you get into Antorus, the Burning Throne. And that's where we're getting into like, well, when we think about the concept of breaking death, right? Death is a machine, and like this is literally like a sorting machine, like an assembly line, a sorting machine. When you get into this, you start thinking about like, what does it mean to break death? Okay, what does that actually like mean? Obviously, in a literal sense, when we're talking about the sorting of souls, okay, that's a way of breaking death. But then there's also the concept of like defying the universal law of death. And what I mean by that is like, let's say an entity, a high power entity of death kills you with maybe a scythe, and then a high power entity of life who should, in a sense, be subservient to death in that they are cyclical in nature. This entity of life, Aeonar, brings us back. Like, we canonically died to Argus the same way that we kind of canonically died to the Lich King when we fought him, when we fought Arthas. But then we're resurrected. The first time through a miracle of the light because of Tyrion Fordring, and the second time because the Lifebinder herself literally brought us back to life. And was like, no. Which is funny to me because you have this pantheon that's supposed to represent order, which you would think would kind of suggest that they would respect cyclical natures of the cosmos and balances between something like life and death. But then you have Aeonar basically go against the natural order of the cosmos and bring us back to life. That could in and of itself been part of what weakened this veil, weakened the barrier between the realm of life and death. And then you have living mortals actually defeating a cosmic level entity of death, which is just like, what the fuck? Like, talk about something that could literally break death. And then you have Sargeras with a gigantic sword who is essentially seemingly enacting the will of death and potentially working with the jailer via Sire Denathrius, You have Sargeras take a giant sword that is, in a metaphysical sense, like potentially cosmic ripping sword, like literally able to puncture through barriers of reality and like non-reality, gigantic sword imbued with the power of death, and stabs it into our planet, which is ultimately the reason why this stuff happened in the first place. Like, let's not forget that without Sargeras and his sword, Azerite isn't a thing. Without the Burning Legion, Sylvanas Windrunner isn't even like a thing as she is now. Right? It's like we can go as far back as that with the Dreadlords and Arthas Menethil. We could go as far back as that to say, look, this is where the plot of like Sargeras and the Jailer may have actually started. And this is we could go back to when Sargeras first found the Dreadlords on that planet with the corrupted world soul, of like things like incrementally coming into play that have led to any of this even happening. Like we get into the sword, Sylvanas, massive death, Teldrassil, Ilune's fury with Tyrande. We get into this like line of events that can only happen because of subsequent events, or subsequent events happening because of initial events. Like none of this happens without what Sargeras and the Burning Legion did. So to me, it doesn't seem a huge stretch of the imagination to think that this could be the work in some capacity of the Burning Legion, and it could align timeline-wise with what we're led to believe. The thing about this soul is this. Whatever this thing is, it doesn't adhere to the flow of the rest of the shit going on. Like it doesn't adhere to all this other stuff. This thing comes in here hot as a motherfucker. And whatever that is, which seems to be a massive something, slams literally into the Arbiter. It doesn't flow around her. It doesn't come before her like the other souls do. This seems to be like directed. Now, I don't know if that's because whatever this power is within her is drawing it to it. I don't know if maybe that's why. Maybe there's some innate connection between whatever the fuck this thing is. Perhaps the eye of the Jailer, if that belongs in his chest. Perhaps this here has some kind of connection happening here. But whatever it is, it hits her right in her little belly. And a volatile explosion of like red light, which again, this reminds me a lot of Argus. Like when Argus first rises, you have his golden soul with like the red around him rising up. But it's just, while I think that it would make sense, I don't want to like jump to the conclusion of like, it's Argus, it's 100% Argus. It's this, like, I'm tired of doing that. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm tired of being that content creator. It's not fulfilling to me anymore. I'd rather let the evidence fall into place and then, go from there. But you have this explosion that causes this like jarring motion because it hits her right in the stomach. We're just going to watch this real slow. And you have this energy kind of like dissipating through her body in this like white, goldish, red pulse. Now this is like very, like when Argus like rises, very similar color palette. This is also very similar to like the color palette of like when you're looking at like the red star in the sky. Like there certainly could be a connection there, but this causes her to like kind of seize up and fail. What I think is kind of funny, and this could be an intentional parallel, when you watch the cinematic of Argus rising, he does a similar thing with his hands where he like comes up and he's like screams and he's like clenched up basically because he's in pain. But we basically have this, she gets hit, she looks up as this energy is like going through her, which seems to cause the orb in her chest to glow this bright white. She's seemingly maybe trying to resist whatever this is happening to her. And at this point, it's just spread all across her. The Arbiter shrieks. as this energy dissipates throughout her and she shuts down. So what the hell was this? Was it Xavius? Was it Argus? Was it a fraction of Sylvanas' soul? What was this? I don't know what this is. And I wish that I could tell you what it was. But I don't know. But let's watch what happens after.
In that dread moment.
And it's funny, because once again, Telenara is referencing a moment. Aeons, a moment, references to time. It's a dread moment. Then you have this dark music playing. Is it Denathrius' sword? No, I don't think it was. I don't know what it was. But in a dread moment, Denathrius used to be referred to as a Lord of Dread, I think is what they called him. Something to that effect. You hear it in the questing. Or maybe it's in the raid, something like that. And Denathrius, his name is quite interesting.
Our perfect order was shattered.
So the whole thing shuts down.
And so it is that every...
And so the interesting thing about this is that this like power burst or whatever this was didn't just affect the Arbiter. Like when you look at what's happening to Oribos itself.
And so it is that every soul...
There was a severing of this link to these other realms. Like it was cut off by whatever caused this this malfunction, this red soul. And then they literally all,
kind and cruel alike, is denied its rightful afterlife.
So here's I just don't. This is what I'm talking about, like the uniformity of death. Like this, when I think of death as orderly, this is how I look at it. Like this is the uniformity that should represent death, in my opinion. You have like a soul siphon that comes through like a big funnel, and they all get funneled into one place. And it's just interesting to like propose this idea of a rightful afterlife, right? And it's funny, every soul, kind and cruel alike.
Kind and cruel alike.
They all go there now. Well, okay. Why is that though? Do they go there now because this red blast reconfigured the machine of death to send them there? Maybe it's like a virus getting into a computer that like fucks the whole thing up. Or does it happen because this connection has been severed to these other realms and now the souls are going into the maw?
Is denied its rightful afterlife, and instead is damned to the inescapable torment of the maw.
See, here's the thing, the inescapable torment of the maw. Well, it sounds to me like the inescapable torment of the maw is only that way because the eternal ones came together and sealed the jailer, their brother, Zoval, into the maw. There was once a time where the jailer wasn't referred to as the jailer, and where the maw was not referred to as the maw. And given the maw has such clearly Greek-inspired theme across the entirety of it, from the place you land to Gorgoa, the River of Souls, to like the names of the areas in that zone, it's so clearly Greek. Like you have the Eternal Traveler who first comes and meets you. His name is Zolteros? Zolteros or something like that. Greek, like everything. It's like Hades in the afterlife, but they're all going there now, and now the jailer's becoming immensely powerful. It just makes me wonder, like this perfect order, this perfected order. I don't think that that's even how it's supposed to be. It seems fucked. And like considering the plausibility that Aenar is the sister of the Winter Queen, that this pantheon of order, or they might as well be known as the pantheon of life at this point, because that's what they set out to protect all the time. And they literally have Aenar, the Lifebinder, as a part of their pantheon. It wouldn't blow my mind if they have been in contact with these guys before. And the reason for which the Shadowlands is even ordered in the capacity that it is because of the influence of the Titans. That would not blow my mind, like at all. And so this idea that there's one of them that's like the super bad guy, whose realm, of course, is color-coded orange, yellow, and black. You look at Sargeras, orange, yellow, and black, who's the bad guy, who did the thing that the other guys didn't want him to do. Like, the parallels are starting to line up even more for me. It's like, what the fuck? There's clearly something going on here, like beyond what's on surface level. But now all the souls go here. It makes me wonder, like, again, I've said this in videos past, what even was the Maw before? Because we also learned through the questing that the Winter Queen used the Heart of the Forest to make the Maw inescapable. I don't know how the fuck that works, but they basically used a giant, like essentially representation of life to bind one of the darkest representations of death. Life Binder, Argus the Unmaker, bound within a world, or like, what the fuck? This is the kind of stuff where it's like, are these accidental like correlations? Am I just like making shit up? I don't know.
Inescapable torment.
And it wouldn't be inescapable torment if it wasn't the way that they made it. Like, it's just so hilarious to me. Like, the whole thing about Sylvanas having us choose our fate, and like, I haven't seen the cinematic, but I've heard enough about it that I know that she's basically siding with the jailer so that there's more control over what happens to us. It's like, at least we get to choose what happens to us instead of being pawns to, like, in order. The same thing that happened on Azeroth with the Titans is essentially happening here with the Eternal Ones, where they have this prospect of order that has been dismantled by the one that they seemingly betrayed, even though they say that he betrayed them. No, it's just like the Sargeras thing, where he went on this crusade to try to fix the fucking universe because they were not doing anything. The Titans weren't doing anything to help. And he is like dismantling their order, and so he's the bad guy. It's the same thing, just in a different realm of like existence, I guess is what we would call it. So again, like, the whole idea that the Maw is this fucking horrible place, it's probably only even that way because they starved it of anima. Like, clearly the Maw is falling apart. Like, there's something wrong with the Maw. There's something wrong with, like, the jailer and Torghast, I would wager as well. Like, and just because something is dark and, like, edgier and made out of metal doesn't mean that it's evil. I think that's, like, such a easy, like, fantasy trope to fall prey to, is like, it looks evil, therefore it must be evil. And therefore things that look good and act good must be good. Like, sometimes a spade is a spade, right? And, you know, sometimes things just are the way that they are, but that's not always true. And if you want to have a twist to what's coming up, then you flip that on its head. So to answer the question, what was this red thing that took out the Arbiter? I have no idea. And I'm not in a position to say it was definitely this. I'd like to think that it was Argus in some capacity because it makes the most sense to me, but I don't know that. I'd like to say that it was a ploy of the Legions, that it was one of their efforts that they had orchestrated maybe with Denathrius and the Jailer, but I don't know that. I feel pretty confident in it, but we don't know. And so that's where I have to leave that. A great cinematic, very cool one. One of my favorites, and I know you guys have been waiting for me to talk about it for a while. But I don't have the answer to this one. I really don't know. At any rate, I hope you guys enjoyed hearing my thoughts. This was a fun one to talk about. I liked it. I'm sure my theories on it will probably change as time progresses, as they should. With that being said, you guys, I appreciate you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please leave a like on here, and a subscription to my channel would be greatly appreciated. The next video is going to be talking about the Primus. And I'm sure you guys have an idea of what I'm going to say there. But if you don't, it's going to be a fun one. Thank you guys for watching this video. Check out my Twitch, twitch.tv/Pyromancer. Check out my Twitter, twitter.com/PyromancerSarg. And of course, a huge thank you to my patrons who, as always, are amazing supporters. Thank you guys so, so much. You guys can check out my Patreon at patreon.com/Pyromancer and get access to exclusive content, early content, and other things, and just support me a little bit beyond what YouTube offers. So thanks again. Appreciate you guys very much. Stay awesome, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace!